Didn't notice the email at first. My screen flickered with the usual morning buzz, Slack pings, calendar reminders, coffee steaming in the cup next to me. But then I saw it. The subject line. Confidential, salary adjustment. My hand froze over the trackpad. The aroma of burnt coffee, the hum of fluorescent lights, the soft tap-tap of keyboards around me, all of it faded. Just me, the words, and the sinking feeling in my chest. No, this can't be real, I whispered under my breath. The office smelled faintly of paper, electronics, and that bitter coffee everyone pretends they like. Sunlight pierced the blinds, casting striped shadows across my desk. My reflection shimmered in the black screen of my laptop, eyes wide, pulse hammering. Each keystroke felt heavy, deliberate. My fingers trembled as I scrolled the email. The numbers jumped out at me, 46% pay cut. And on the sidebar, just visible from the open Slack window, a message from the CEO boasting about a 6-figure bonus. My stomach churned. Betrayal wasn't even the right word. This was erasure. All the late nights, every report, every presentation, wiped clean by a single, casual click from someone with more power than I could comprehend. They think I won't notice. They think I'm invisible, I whispered, jaw tight. I let my eyes wander across the office. Colleagues murmuring over monitors, coffee mugs clinking, heels clicking against polished floors. None of them knew. Or maybe some did. Maybe they were just scared, like I should be. Fear had a smell, too, a mix of anxiety and cheap perfume. But not me. My hands clenched the edge of my desk. My pulse slowed as a thought struck. This wasn't just injustice. It was proof waiting to be collected. Every email, every document, every meeting note, they couldn't erase it all. Not if I was careful. I reached for my notebook, the leather cover cool and rough under my fingertips. Pen in hand, I scribbled notes, my handwriting jagged with adrenaline. Every click of my mouse felt like a drumbeat counting down to something. The hum of the AC, distant laughter in the hallway, the subtle vibration of a phone, all became part of a rhythm I was learning to move with, to observe, to plan. Steam curled lazily from my cup. I inhaled, letting the bitter aroma anchor me to reality. The office sounds, keyboard clatter, printer whirs, muted conference calls felt magnified, like they were background to the movie of my unraveling. Every little detail would matter if I was going to turn this around. Scrolling through internal reports, I noticed anomalies, budget lines that didn't add up, bonus approvals that weren't in my knowledge, emails misdirected, attachments missing. My stomach sank deeper. It wasn't just me. They were doing this to the team. And that's when it hit me. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be smart. I would gather the evidence, every slip, every excess. Every reflection in the glossy office panels reminded me I was already invisible to them. But soon, I wouldn't be. They're gonna regret this. I see everything. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the silence of the office settle around me. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant chatter, the faint smell of coffee, it all became part of a larger plan, a pulse I could synchronize with. My heartbeat slowed, replaced with a quiet, deliberate determination. I wasn't powerless. Not yet. I glanced around the office one last time, watching the morning sun stretch across polished floors, highlighting colleagues who laughed and typed, unaware of the storm brewing behind the quiet exterior of one woman. I inhaled, feeling the weight of every injustice, every slight, every erased line of my labor. And in that inhale, I made a silent vow to myself. They had underestimated me. They had erased the numbers on a page, but they could never erase me. Not the hours, not the ideas, not the vision I carried. Let them watch. Let them wonder. I picked up my coffee, the warmth seeping into my hands, grounding me. My reflection in the mug's dark surface stared back, a reminder that the game had changed, that the quiet storm was already gathering. I was calm, but inside, fire was building. And just like that, the office, with all its hums, clatters, and casual conversations, faded into the background. The world had shifted in a single email, and I was already moving, thinking, planning. The beginning of my comeback, my reckoning, was quietly taking shape. Would you walk away or fight back? Tell me in the comments. The conference room smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee, the lingering aroma of morning meetings. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, cutting across the polished table in sharp lines. I slid into my chair, feeling the cold plastic back press against me, listening to the soft scrape of other chairs as colleagues settled in. My laptop hummed to life, keys clicking softly as people opened files, papers rustling as pens scratched notes. Every sound, every movement felt magnified, sharp against the quiet undercurrent of tension that had been building since that email. The CEO, Mr. Camden, leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, fingers drumming against the polished table. His smile was easy, practiced, but his eyes flickered, tiny, almost imperceptible betrayals of impatience. I had seen that look before. It was the mask of someone who knew they were cornering others, claiming the victory they didn't earn. He began speaking, and the words cut straight to the core. This project exceeded our expectations thanks to the leadership in this room, he said, scanning the team. And, of course, my guidance ensured that we stayed on track. The murmurs around the table, absolutely, couldn't agree more, felt like knives against my back. My work, months of late nights and painstaking details, erased in a single sweeping gesture of his ego. I felt the tension coil in my shoulders, a pressure building beneath the calm surface I maintained. My hands rested lightly on the table, fingertips brushing against the smooth wood, steady, deliberate. They think they can erase me. Not today, I whispered silently to myself, letting the words anchor me. I watched the micro-expressions of the room. One colleague, lips pressed thin, eyebrows slightly raised, avoided direct eye contact. Another tapped a pen nervously against a notebook, jaw tight, clearly conflicted. I took it all in. The subtle shifts in posture, the tiny hesitations, the way eyes darted to the CEO, then away. Every gesture, every glance, told me more than words ever could. Mr. Camden leaned forward, emphasizing a slide with glossy graphs and numbers. The timeline was aggressive, and the milestones achieved were beyond what I anticipated. Thanks to my leadership, we avoided any major setbacks. He tapped the screen, eyes gleaming. I felt a flash of anger, heat rising, but I didn't react outwardly. I sat still, breathing slow and controlled, letting each word wash over me. My mind, however, was a machine, calculating, noting discrepancies in his statements, connecting dots he thought I hadn't noticed. Every false claim was another data point, another weapon in my arsenal. Stay calm. Watch. Wait. Collect, I reminded myself. My pulse steadied, the anger tempered by strategy. This wasn't the moment to explode. It was the moment to observe, to record, to plan. I glanced at the laptop screen in front of me, open to the shared project files. Every chart, every progress update, every email trail was a silent witness to the work I had poured into this project. My eyes flicked from the screen to Mr. Camden's hand gestures, slick, rehearsed motions that tried to command the room. The way he leaned back, fingers steepled, the faint tension in his jaw, it all revealed the cracks beneath his confident facade. The room hummed with subtle sounds. The tapping of keys, the soft scratch of pens, the low murmur of whispers as team members nodded or murmured agreements. The ambient buzz of fluorescent lights overhead, combined with the distant elevator ding, created a strange rhythm that synced with the tension rising inside me. Every detail mattered. Every reaction, every hesitation would be logged in my memory for later. A colleague leaned slightly forward, eyes flicking to mine. There was a question there, an unspoken acknowledgement of what was happening. I offered a slight nod, subtle, controlled. That small motion, invisible to most, was my signal. I saw it. I remembered. I was already forming a plan. Mr. Camden's voice droned on, punctuated by slides and statistics, but I was somewhere else, analyzing. Every overstatement, every we that should have been I, every exaggeration, proof. I felt a thrill of quiet determination, a controlled surge of power that came not from shouting or confrontation, but from knowledge. Knowledge is what he underestimated. Knowledge is what would turn the tide. Every word, every gesture, every claim. Noted, not forgotten, I whispered under my breath, barely moving my lips. As he continued, I noticed the reflections in the glossy table surface. My own eyes, focused and sharp, mirrored back at me. The sunlight streaks illuminated the determined set of my jaw, the slight narrowing of my eyes. I was both participant and observer, blending in while mentally documenting everything. He paused, turning toward a whiteboard, gesturing expansively. And that's why this milestone positions us ahead of the competition. Clearly, leadership was the key. He smiled, a little too broadly, clearly basking in unearned praise. I leaned slightly forward, elbows resting lightly on the table, hands folded. My mind ran through counterpoints, evidence, and subtle ways to expose the truth without letting him see my plan forming. Each nod, each polite acknowledgement was a calculated move. Patience was my weapon, controlled anger my shield. They won't see it coming. Not a second of it, I whispered again, a promise more to myself than anyone else. I noted the subtle cues in his colleagues. One rolled her eyes ever so slightly when his back was turned. Another tapped her pen faster than necessary, betraying nervous energy. They were caught between loyalty and recognition of reality. And I, silent, calculating, observing, was the eye in the storm, gathering what they were too timid to confront. The meeting stretched on, the minutes crawling, each second a tension wire tightening. Chairs creaked as people shifted, pens scratched, laptops opened and closed in rhythm with the false praise and strategic self-promotion surrounding me. I counted every word, every gesture, every flicker of a facial twitch, cataloging what I would need. By the time Mr. Camden concluded, a round of polite applause rippled through the room. I joined in, slow, deliberate, letting the motion feel natural while my mind raced. Nothing escaped me. Nothing. Every false claim, every stolen credit, was now data, evidence waiting to be wielded. I packed my notebook slowly, fingers brushing over pages filled with details, names, dates, inconsistencies. The sound of paper shifting, pens clicking closed, was a quiet symphony to my mind. Outside the conference room, life continued, fluorescent lights, distant murmurs, coffee machines hissing, but inside me, a storm was quietly gathering. Patience, Jasmine. They have no idea. Not yet, I whispered under my breath. I stepped out into the hallway, heels clicking softly against polished floors. The reflections in the glass walls mirrored my calm exterior, but inside, a controlled fire burned. The game had changed. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Every false claim, every gesture, every micro-expression was a piece of the puzzle. And when the time came, they would see. The person they underestimated, the quiet observer, the one they tried to erase, would emerge in full force. Be honest. What would you do if it was you sitting in that room? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear you. The office was quiet now, or at least quiet enough to let the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft purr of computers fill the air. I sat at my desk, coffee long gone cold, swirling faint rings on the polished wood, and stared at the screen before me. Rows of code, project logs, email threads, budget sheets, all of it lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. Each file a puzzle piece, each keystroke a deliberate step towards something far greater than a simple email complaint. The sun had shifted across the blinds, casting stripes across my desk. I could see my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop, eyes sharp, focused, lips pressed lightly together. My fingertips hovered over the keyboard, feeling the smooth plastic keys beneath them. I inhaled slowly, the faint aroma of electronics and lingering coffee grounding me in the present, yet my mind raced 1,000 miles ahead. Patience. Precision. Every detail counts, I whispered softly to myself. I opened the shared project folder and started scrolling, scanning every line of code, every timestamp, every note from the past 6 months. The files were unassuming, plain text, spreadsheets, reports, but hidden inside were traces of decisions, approvals, and invisible fingerprints that pointed back to me. Everything Mr. Camden had claimed, everything he had tried to make disappear, was quietly documented. All I had to do was weave it together. The sound of keys clicking filled the silence, punctuated by the distant hum of the AC, the subtle tap of pens from the few late-working colleagues, the faint whir of printers somewhere down the hall. Every sound was a metronome, syncing with the rhythm of my mind. I moved with deliberate care, scrolling, copying, nesting, embedding lines of code that would, when triggered, reveal everything. Each line was a whisper of my patience. Each command typed was a promise. I paused to adjust my chair, feeling the cold plastic bite lightly into my thighs, and leaned closer. My eyes reflected off the monitor in a faint blue glow. Tiny imperfections in the code stood out now, the misattributed comments, timestamps that didn't match up, hints of edits erased or misfiled. They were breadcrumbs, and I would use them all. They think this is invisible. Let's see how invisible it really is, I murmured under my breath, barely moving my lips. I minimized the chat windows, keeping the desktop clear. The office felt alive around me, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the distant elevator bell, the soft murmur of conversations in hallways, but inside this bubble, I was entirely alone, entirely in control. I opened the hidden log folder, my fingers tracing the mousepad with precision, a quiet thrill rising with each discovery. Every misstep by management, every falsified claim, was a key I would use to unlock the truth. I began embedding subtle flags into the code, triggers that would, when the time was right, bring the evidence into plain sight. My hands moved with practiced ease: copy, paste, test, scroll. I felt the tactile resistance of the keyboard beneath my fingers, heard the soft thump of the return key, each sound magnifying my focus. The thrill of control ran like electricity through me. This was mine. My plan. My timing. I leaned back for a moment, letting my eyes drift to the ceiling, listening to the quiet symphony of office life. Distant laughter, the soft squeak of chair wheels, the hum of an idling computer. The reflections in my monitor flickered, showing me a version of myself calm on the surface, but inside, calculating every outcome. The patience, the observation, the quiet thrill, it all fed the plan. Not yet. Soon. Perfect timing, I whispered. I scrolled again, line by line, running mental simulations of how each piece would interact. If the CEO tried to cover his tracks, the hidden code would expose him. If colleagues tried to intervene prematurely, the logs would protect the truth. Every microsecond of delay, every misdirected folder, every email misstep, they were all accounted for, cataloged in my mind, ready to unfold. The tactile sensation of the mouse, the smooth glide across the pad, the subtle resistance of keys, it was almost meditative. And yet, behind that calm, a subtle electricity built. Every file I touched, every command I typed, brought me closer to the moment when the entire room would see what had been hidden. I paused, hand resting lightly on the edge of the keyboard, eyes tracing the lines of code like a map. The office around me continued its gentle rhythm. The distant printer, the faint echo of footsteps, the hum of fluorescent lights, but I was alone in a different space. A space where patience was power, where observation was strategy, and where quiet control could become a weapon. I double-checked the flags, the embedded triggers. One misstep could ruin it. One premature reveal could backfire. But I was careful. Always careful. Each scroll, each keystroke, each calculation was deliberate. Every hidden timestamp, every comment misattributed, was part of the crescendo waiting to happen. "They have no idea what's coming," I murmured, almost smiling. The anticipation pulsed beneath my skin, slow and steady. My body was still, but my mind raced. The thrill of holding this knowledge, of orchestrating a reveal that would be undeniable, was intoxicating. The office, lights, reflections, ambient sounds faded into the background. All that existed was the code, the evidence, and the control I wielded over it. I leaned closer to the screen, fingertips poised over the keyboard, eyes scanning each line for one final check. Every small action mattered: the order of commands, the timing, the precision. The subtle interplay of triggers, logs, and hidden flags would orchestrate the moment of revelation perfectly. Outside the window, the sun dipped slightly, casting long shadows across the polished floors. My reflection in the dark screen stared back at me, calm, focused, deadly patient. I pressed my hands lightly against the desk, feeling the rough grain under my palms, grounding me. I was ready. "Soon. Just a little longer," I whispered, the words barely audible. And as I scrolled one last time, double-checking every line, every hidden log, every subtle trigger, a quiet thrill settled over me. I was in complete control. The office noises, keys clicking, printers humming, distant murmurs were a backdrop to the storm I was quietly building. The reveal would come, and when it did, no one would be able to ignore the truth. Every stolen credit, every erased effort, every act of arrogance would be exposed, and I would be the one who made it undeniable. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant chatter, the faint scent of lingering coffee, all of it felt amplified in the anticipation. My reflection in the screen, eyes sharp and calculating, met my own gaze. I was ready. Every keystroke, every scroll, every hidden flag was a heartbeat, counting down to a moment that would change everything. And I, Jasmine Harper, had the rhythm of it all under my fingers. The office, the team, the CEO, they had no idea what was coming. The office had a rhythm of its own that morning, soft hums of fluorescent lights overhead, distant chatter from hallways, the occasional squeak of chair legs against polished floors. Every sound felt amplified to me, each one a thread I could follow, a clue to the larger web forming around me. I leaned slightly in my chair, coffee cup forgotten at my side, eyes flicking across the room. Mr. Camden was at his usual corner office, arms draped casually over the back of his chair, a practiced smile in place. His gestures were confident, almost theatrical, the flick of a hand here, a tilt of the head there, every motion reinforcing the image of control he wanted everyone to see. And yet, I noticed the little tells. The slight twitch of his jaw when he didn't get the immediate response he wanted. The subtle narrowing of his eyes when a team member challenged his assertion. He believed he was orchestrating the room. In reality, he was feeding me. "They're making it too easy," I whispered softly under my breath. My colleagues were busy too, though unaware of the invisible lines of observation I had drawn between us. One leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, lips pressed thin, eyebrows flicking nervously toward the door. Another tapped a pen rhythmically against her notebook, eyes darting to the screens, silently calculating how she would contribute, how she would respond to the CEO's maneuvers. I watched every micro-expression, every shift in weight, every subtle inhale and exhale. The sound of pens scratching against paper, keyboards clattering softly, and the faint hiss of a printer down the hall formed a symphony to which my mind danced. Each motion, each reaction, was a piece of data. Every moment was a heartbeat in a larger sequence, one I had already memorized. The sunlight fell through the blinds, creating sharp lines across polished desks and laptop screens. I could see my reflection in the dark screen of my own monitor, the faint blue glow illuminating the determination in my eyes. My fingers rested lightly on the edge of the desk, tracing the contours of the wood grain, feeling the subtle bumps and grooves. Each texture, each sensation anchored me in the present, sharpened my focus. I scrolled through my own files again, double-checking the hidden markers and embedded code. Every line of evidence, every subtle log, was perfectly poised to trigger when the moment came. I felt a quiet thrill, a controlled electricity running through me. This wasn't just work, it was choreography, and everyone around me was dancing to my rhythm, completely unaware. "Soon, just a little longer," I murmured, letting the words settle in my chest like a drumbeat. "Mr." Camden walked past my desk, speaking loudly to someone in a neighboring cubicle. His voice carried authority, smooth and polished, but I caught the micro shifts, hesitation in syllables, a slight furrow of the brow, a quick glance toward my monitor as if subconsciously checking his territory. Every gesture, every careless movement was feeding the setup I had built in secret. I adjusted in my chair, elbows resting lightly on the polished surface, eyes tracking his every motion while my mind simultaneously ran multiple calculations. Who would notice first? Which colleague was closest to discovering my hidden work? How would I time the reveal to maximize impact? Each question was answered in fractions of a second, mental simulations running like silent programs inside my skull. The hum of computers, the faint whir of the HVAC, the distant clatter of heels against the hallway floors, all of it became background rhythm. My pulse was calm, measured, each beat syncing with the anticipation building inside me. I felt a subtle satisfaction in knowing the chaos around me was unknowingly reinforcing my plan. The more they acted, the more evidence I gathered, the more airtight the reveal would be. I leaned closer to my monitor, fingertips hovering over the keyboard, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath them. I scrolled again, line by line, checking timestamps, cross-referencing emails, verifying that every log, every marker, every hidden code snippet was in perfect alignment. My hands rested lightly, almost meditative, yet my mind raced with excitement. Each small action, from the tap of a key to the soft movement of the mouse, carried meaning. I noticed a colleague glance at my screen, her expression shifting ever so slightly from curiosity to confusion. She didn't know what she was seeing, didn't understand the significance. But her reaction added to the tension, a tiny thread in the larger fabric I was weaving. I offered a subtle nod, almost imperceptible, signaling silently. Yes, I see. Yes, I know. Across the room, Mr. Camden began a meeting with a smaller group, gesturing expansively, claiming credit for milestones he hadn't achieved. His voice carried across the room, polished and authoritative, but every gesture, every smile too rehearsed, fed my analysis. I noted the flicker of hesitation when someone questioned a timeline, the shift in weight when he made an assertive point, the faint tapping of a colleague's pen in nervous agreement. They think they're in control. Let them, I whispered, feeling the thrill coil tighter in my chest. The office lights reflected off glossy surfaces, monitors, tabletops, polished floors, casting fractured reflections of movements and gestures. I caught my own gaze in a monitor, eyes steady and sharp, lips pressed lightly together. Confidence flowed beneath the surface of quiet observation. I was learning them, predicting their actions, absorbing every nuance. Anger bubbled quietly but was fully contained, transformed into a tool of calculation. I returned to my hidden code, scrolling and double-checking triggers. The anticipation pulsed like a slow, steady drumbeat. Each line of evidence, each subtle digital footprint, each manipulated timestamp was a note in a symphony I alone could conduct. When the moment came, there would be no argument, no denial, only undeniable truth. I leaned back, stretching slightly, feeling the cool plastic of my chair, the rough edges of the desk beneath my palms. The sunlight shifted again, reflecting off a nearby monitor, highlighting the subtle concentration etched on my face. The subtle thrill of control coursed through me, quiet but undeniable. Every motion in the office, every gesture, every micro-expression was being cataloged, analyzed, and woven into my unfolding plan. A soft whisper escaped me as I scrolled again. Soon. Perfect timing. The colleagues around me carried on, unaware, their voices low, pens scratching, laptops opening and closing, murmurs of strategy and discussion flowing like background music. Every small action reinforced my understanding of their dynamics, of power and perception, of ego and fear. I felt excitement rise quietly in my chest, tempered by patience and the controlled focus that had brought me this far. Every subtle glance, every whispered concern, every twitch of a pen or eye was a note in the crescendo I had been composing. I felt the suppressed thrill of knowing, finally, that the stage was set. The reveal, when it came, would be perfect, unavoidable, unmistakable. I pressed my fingertips lightly on the desk, inhaling the mixture of faint coffee, polished wood, and electronics. The office seemed to pulse with the energy I had woven into it, reflections glinting in polished surfaces, shadows stretching across desks, whispers floating in the air like tiny instruments in a quiet orchestra. Patience? Jasmine? They'll never see it coming. The anticipation settled over me like a mantle, warm and steady, fueling every calculation, every observation. Mr. Camden, my colleagues, the entire office, they were all unwitting participants in the setup. Every micro-expression, every gesture, every careless motion strengthened the plan, building toward a crescendo only I could orchestrate. And as I leaned back in my chair, letting the rhythm of the office flow around me, the hum, the chatter, the click of keyboards, I felt it. The quiet, unshakable certainty that the moment of revelation was approaching. Each heartbeat, each tap, each breath was a step closer. Soon, every carefully hidden line of code, every logged misstep, every erased effort would speak, and I would be there, calm, confident, in full command of the truth. Not long now. Just a little longer. Vince, you won't believe what happens next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The office smelled faintly of polished wood, lingering coffee, and the cool metallic scent of computers left idling. Sunlight sliced through the blinds, falling in thin, sharp lines across the desks and reflecting off screens. I sat at my workstation, shoulders relaxed but every muscle alert, fingertips poised above the keyboard. The hum of the fluorescent lights, distant printer whirs, and soft murmur of colleagues in nearby cubicles created a rhythm I could move to, a rhythm that matched the meticulous timing of my plan. I opened the hidden folders again, scanning each line of code, each embedded marker, each carefully preserved log. The evidence I had collected over weeks was now perfectly positioned, ready to unfold, undeniable, irreversible. Every timestamp, every misattributed email, every erased note was meticulously organized, like pieces of a puzzle waiting for the final assembly. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, absorbing the quiet anticipation in the room. I inhaled deeply, tasting the faint bitterness of the cold coffee beside me, feeling the polished surface of the desk beneath my palms, the subtle resistance of the keyboard keys beneath my fingertips. Each sensation grounded me, sharpening my focus. Just a little longer. I whispered softly, almost a murmur, letting the words coil quietly in my chest like a promise. I ran through the sequence in my mind again. Step 1. Trigger the code. Step 2. Ensure the logs and emails aligned perfectly. Step 3. Observe silently as the evidence revealed itself to the world. Every possible reaction, every facial twitch, every whispered comment, every gesture of shock was anticipated, calculated, rehearsed. The sunlight flickered against the glass panels, reflecting faint blue and gold across my monitors. I adjusted my chair slightly, feeling the smooth plastic press against my back, the rough edges of the desk beneath my fingers. Tiny sounds filled the room, the click of a pen, a soft exhale, the tap of a colleague's keyboard. I let them flow around me, absorbing every nuance, weaving them into the rhythm of the plan, I scrolled through the code one last time, tracing each embedded trigger, checking the visual markers that would make the reveal impossible to ignore. My pulse was steady, but beneath it, a slow, thrilling tension built. I could feel the excitement in my chest, the quiet electricity of control that only comes when you are ready to act with absolute certainty. I imagined their faces, the CEO's forced composure cracking, the colleagues' wide-eyed disbelief, the murmurs that would ripple through the room. Every flicker of eyebrow, every gasp, every shuffle of a chair was already mapped in my mind. The anticipation was intoxicating, a slow-building crescendo that matched the rhythm of my careful heartbeats. The reflection of my own face in the dark screen of the laptop stared back at me. Calm, poised, unshakable. Confidence radiated from within, steady and undeniable. Every minor gesture I made, adjusting the angle of the chair, brushing my fingers along the desk, shifting my eyes from screen to monitor, was deliberate, almost ritualistic, preparing me for the final act. I paused and pressed my fingertips lightly against the edge of the desk, feeling the texture, tracing the grooves, as if letting the world itself imprint the moment into my memory. The hum of the office, the printers, the AC, the distant chatter became part of the cinematic backdrop, a quiet stage awaiting the performance. I mentally rehearsed the reveal. My movements, subtle yet deliberate, would guide the eyes of everyone toward the evidence without them realizing it until the impact hit. The screens would light up with the hidden code, the logs would align, and the trail of misattributed work would be undeniable. My pulse quickened slightly at the thought, excitement tempered by the patience I had honed over weeks. I traced my plan step by step, whispering softly to myself, "It's all coming together." The words were both reassurance and a silent celebration. I could feel the weight of every action, every calculation, every concealed detail pressing gently against my consciousness. And yet, in that pressure, there was clarity, precision, and the undeniable thrill of anticipation. I glanced at my colleagues across the office, some bent over screens, some murmuring softly in conversation. None suspected. Every gesture, every glance, every smile was feeding the rhythm I had already internalized. The CEO, in his corner office, leaned back, smug in his assumption that control remained his. Each motion, each word, each unguarded expression was being recorded in my mind, cataloged as part of the choreography I had orchestrated. I shifted slightly in my chair, feeling the smooth leather and the faint chill of the laptop beneath my palms. I pictured their reactions. Eyes widening, pens tapping nervously, quiet gasps. The suspense surged inside me, a slow, deliberate tide. I opened the final window, checking every line of code, every hidden log. The sequence was flawless. Sunlight reflected gold across floors and screens, my own reflection sharp and steady. Every movement, adjusting the monitor, tapping my pen, inhaling slowly, was a rehearsal for the moment the hidden truth would strike. "Almost there," I whispered, letting the words anchor me. The conference room felt electric. Sunlight cut sharp lines through the blinds, glinting off polished desks and glass. The hum of lights, distant computers, and subtle whispers formed a symphony around me. Fingers poised over keys, I swept the room, noting micro-expressions. The CEO's jaw tightening, his fingers gripping the armrests, fleeting doubt in his eyes. Colleagues shifted in anticipation, pens frozen, chairs scraping softly. Patience. Precision. The moment I'd orchestrated for weeks had arrived. I pressed the first key. Lines of code, emails, and logs cascaded across the screen, tracing months of erased work, misattributed credit, falsified reports. Faces registered shock, awe, disbelief. "Oh, they're seeing it now," I murmured. The CEO's hand twitched toward the mouse, but I anticipated it. Another keystroke aligned everything perfectly. The evidence was undeniable. Colleagues gasped, whispered, exchanged stunned glances. Every subtle gesture confirmed months of hidden work now fully restored. He finally spoke, voice low and faltering. "Jasmine, this can't be." Sevens. I leaned forward slightly, hands resting lightly on the desk, eyes locked on him. Calm, composed, controlled. Every fiber of me radiated certainty. Nothing he could say or do would alter the truth now illuminated for everyone to see. "Look closely. Camden. Watch carefully," I whispered under my breath. The murmurs grew louder, whispers turning into half-uttered exclamations. Colleagues glanced at one another, silent confirmation passing in their eyes. My work, my voice, my months of labor erased were now visible, undeniable. And in the center of it all, I remained steady, observing, calculating, savoring the controlled thrill of victory. He opened his mouth again, this time to argue, but the room cut him off, eyes fixed on the screen, expressions frozen in shock. Every gesture, every blink, every hesitation amplified the impact. The reflective surfaces of laptops and polished wood mirrored the tableau of awe and humiliation alike. I pressed another key, finalizing the last visual alignment. Emails, hidden logs, and project timelines displayed clearly, showing beyond doubt where credit was due and where deception had been. The room was silent, save for the occasional soft exhale, the whisper of pens against paper, the faint hum of lights. Every second stretched like film, cinematic, deliberate, perfect. I allowed a slow exhale, letting the tension settle, my heartbeat calm yet victorious. The satisfaction ran deep, emotional, layered, justice delivered not through confrontation, but through meticulous patience and strategy. Every flicker of shock, every hesitation, every micro-expression had validated the long hours of planning, observation, and execution. The CEO's shoulders slumped, face pale, jaw tight, lips pressed in a thin line. Colleagues murmured among themselves, sharing glances of awe and quiet relief. The evidence was clear, undeniable. The stolen work, the erased efforts, the months of labor, they all now pointed to me, Jasmine Harper, as the rightful architect. I leaned back slightly, fingers brushing over the smooth surface of the desk, feeling the textures, grounding myself in the moment. The sunlight reflected off the monitors, catching glimpses of astonishment in faces around the room. Every whisper, every gasp, every hesitation had been anticipated, and the unfolding reality exceeded even my calculated expectations. "They'll never forget this," I murmured quietly, a private note of triumph. I allowed my eyes to roam the room, savoring the ripple of comprehension spreading. The hum of the office, the distant chatter, the faint sound of keyboards and chairs, all became part of the cinematic tableau, a room caught between disbelief, awe, and vindication. Every micro-expression told a story. Shock, hesitation, acknowledgement, and finally, acceptance. And in that moment, I felt it fully. Calm triumph, strategic victory, emotional satisfaction. Months of erased work, belittlement, and oversight had culminated in a single, undeniable statement. Every calculated step, every hidden code, Every patient observation had led to this crescendo. I let my hands rest lightly on the keyboard, fingertips brushing the smooth surface, feeling the rhythm of the office pulse around me. My mind replayed each moment, each keystroke, each precise calculation, confirming that the reveal had been executed flawlessly. The CEO, still pale and hesitant, finally sat back, realizing the futility of argument. Colleagues exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others visibly relieved, all quietly acknowledging the truth. I allowed a slow, satisfied smile to curve across my lips, internal triumph radiating through every fiber. The evidence stood undeniable. The work was mine. The recognition was mine. The victory, patiently, strategically earned, was mine. Justice, finally, I whispered softly, letting the words sink into the quiet hum of the office, savoring the full weight of the moment. And as the light shifted across the room, reflections glinting off polished surfaces, I realized that months of patience, observation, and strategy had transformed the office from a place of quiet injustice into a stage of undeniable truth. Every gaze, every whisper, every micro-expression confirmed it. I had won. The office felt transformed. The hum of fluorescent lights was softer, sunlight spilling through the blinds in golden stripes, reflecting across polished desks and glass walls. Colleagues moved differently now, subtle nods, quiet smiles, whispered acknowledgments. The air carried a sense of calm triumph, the weight of truth finally revealed. I rested my hands lightly on the polished desk, inhaling the faint aroma of coffee and electronics. Every reflection, every glint of sunlight on monitors seemed to underscore the magnitude of what had happened. Months of erased work, overlooked effort, and subtle injustice had been laid bare. And in that moment, integrity and patience had triumphed. "We rise by lifting truth into the light," I whispered softly, letting the words settle in the quiet room. The CEO sat in subdued reflection, shoulders tense, jaw tight. He had been unmasked not through confrontation, but through strategy, observation, and undeniable evidence. My colleagues exchanged glances, some leaning forward in admiration, others quietly absorbing the lesson. Patience, intelligence, and persistence can overcome even systemic inequities. I felt a surge of quiet pride knowing the impact of this moment would ripple far beyond the walls of this office. I traced sunlight across my monitor, feeling warmth on my face, the smooth edge of my laptop under my fingers, grounding me in the cinematic rhythm of the room. The subtle hum of computers, the faint tapping of pens, and soft murmurs of acknowledgement formed the soundtrack of victory. Every minor gesture, eyes widening in realization, whispered reactions, slight exhalations, added texture to the moment, evidence of empowerment in motion. It's not just about recognition. It's about integrity, authenticity, resilience, I murmured, absorbing the truth of my own words. Colleagues returned to their tasks, but the energy had shifted. Conversations carried a new respect for strategy, honesty, and skill. I noticed a young black colleague pause mid-step, eyes shining with understanding and inspiration. Another nodded subtly, internalizing the lesson that perseverance and brilliance can overcome invisibility and bias. I leaned back, closing my eyes briefly, breathing in the sunlight and quiet of the office. Months of careful observation, embedded code, and precise planning had culminated in this moment, a cinematic affirmation that integrity paired with intelligence is unstoppable. The office, once a place of subtle inequities, had become a stage where truth and justice held center. Truth endures. Patience prevails. Our work has value. I whispered softly, letting the words resonate across the room, across reflections, and into the hearts of those who had witnessed it. And in that golden light, with colleagues quietly acknowledging the victory, I realized this moment was more than personal vindication. It was proof that strategy, honesty, and resilience could transform environments, inspire others, and assert the worth of those too often overlooked. Jasmine Harper had not just reclaimed her work. She had illuminated a path for others. Patience, intellect, and integrity are forces that cannot be erased. The office, bathed in light and quiet reverence, was no longer just a workplace. It was a testament to perseverance, empowerment, and the enduring power of truth. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us who we are.